Hello everyone, my name is Landon Knight, and this is the beginning of my new series that I am going to be doing, and with it, my new channel. So today we are going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons, specifically monsters. My goal for this series is to go through every monster in the 2024 Monster Manual. And so I'm going to be looking at lore of the specific creature, but also information from the old Monster Manual and the 2024 Monster Manual, but also the way the creatures work mechanically, like how I've used them as a Dungeon Master, how I've seen other people use them as a Dungeon Master, or just like my general thoughts on how you could use these creatures in a game and as a Dungeon Master. And so I want this video to be the starting point. So someone coming into Dungeons & Dragons can watch this video and get all the information that they need to begin their journey into it. And so Dungeons & Dragons itself, in general, is, well, really, Dungeons & Dragons can be anything that you want it to be. You want to play some space fantasy themed campaign? Go ahead. You can give yourself lasers and guns and spaceships. You want to play more medieval fantasy type game? Then you can do just that with knights and swords and kings and queens. The possibilities in Dungeons & Dragons are limited by your own imagination. That is the only thing that bounds this game. But the regular setting that Dungeons & Dragons takes place in is this place called the Forgotten Realms. Now, the Forgotten Realms are generally probably what you might think of as regular Dungeons & Dragons. The, knights and high fantasy, and you have wizards, and you have like tribes, orcs, elves, magic, all those sort of things. So the regular Forgotten Realms setting that Dungeons & Dragons uses is medieval fantasy and really high fantasy with a lot of magic. And so whenever I talk about the lore of these monsters and creatures, I'm going to be specifically referring to the lore of this creature in the Forgotten Realms setting, unless I specify otherwise. But typically, when I talk about lore, it's going to be about these creatures in the Forgotten Realms. And so from there, I want to give a general overview of all the different classes in this game. So as a player, you choose a class that you want to be. And there's a bunch of different classes. And once you pick, they give you different abilities. And so first, we're going to start with Barbarian. So the Barbarian is like this really angry, charge into combat, he's resistant to damage and deal a good amount of damage, usually wielding a great axe or a great sword. And so they're the angry barbarians. Like that word, yeah, that's what they are. Next you have bards, which are kind of spellcaster, but specifically bards play instruments, and they kind of use these instruments to cast their spells. And so they sing and they dance, and one of the bard's signature spells is a spell called Vicious Mockery, where you viciously mock an enemy so bad that it literally deals psychic damage. It's like a your mom joke that hurts so much that you are mentally wounded. Bards also get this thing called Bardic Inspiration. You can give to your friends, help their rolls be better. But yeah, that's Bard. And so next is Cleric. Clerics are like the holy priests of this game. They're spellcasters, and they typically align themselves with some sort of god or goddess, and this god or goddess gives them their spells and their power. Clerics typically are kind of a support class. Their magic usually like either heals or supports or bolsters in some way, or it can smite, send fire down from heaven, And next we have Druid. So Druids are like the nature spellcasters of this game. They manipulate the elements, do things like control the weather, create like storms, that sort of thing. They can also shapeshift into animals. They're nature people, animal people, that sort of thing. Then you have the fighter. Literally, they're just a fighter. Like your knight, your swordsman, your archer, fighter. You are really good at a lot of different weapons and armor, and you fight with weapons. That's what a fighter is. Then you have monk. Monks are super fast, super quick, and they are the martial artists of this game. Taekwondo, karate, jiu-jitsu, whatever it is, that's your monk. And so in the old player's handbook, monks used this kind of energy called ki. In the 2024 edition, they don't really do that anymore. They sort of do, but basically the whole idea behind monk is they use like your soul energy, not just their own soul energy, but their enemy's soul energy. They can manipulate it in ways to harm the enemy and help you or your teammates. And so that's what monk is. Next is paladin. So paladins are these big, usually wearing heavy armor, holding a big sword, and dealing tons of damage in the front lines. They're also good support classes. They have an aura which emanates from them a certain distance, and the paladin and its friends get a certain benefit depending on what the aura is. And so they are half casters. So they get some spells, but not as much as the cleric or the wizard, who are full casters. But the paladin's big thing is their divine smite, when they hit a creature with a sword and deal tons of damage in addition to the regular sword damage. And so that's what a paladin is. Then you have ranger, which is another half caster. And their big thing typically is like bows. But rangers don't have to use bows. They can use swords or any other kind of weapon, really. But they are the wanderers of the wild. They're rangers. They protect kind of natural areas. Typically, in the old edition, you would choose like a specific favored terrain, and you would get certain benefits while you and your party were traveling in that terrain. But you also chose a specific favored enemy. And so that was the kind of flavor of rangers, that you had a specific type of creature, monster, that you were good at hunting, and you had a specific type of land that you could run around in. You were really good at. In the current stuff, it doesn't really work that way anymore, but hunters, survivalists out in the wild, that's the kind of idea of a ranger. And so next we have rogue. Rogues are the assassins, the thieves, the stealthy guys of this group. They get this thing called a sneak attack, where they do a bunch of extra damage, sort of like a paladin smite, except sneak attack version. And so assassins, thieves, tricksters, all that kind of idea. That's your rogue. Then you have sorcerers. So sorcerers are full casters. And the big idea with sorcerers is that they get their magic innately. Like, it's a part of their blood. And this is usually brought about by some great being impacting a sorcerer's blood. Maybe you were impacted by the clockwork plane of Mechanus, or the clockwork god Primus. And so your magic is born in clockwork. or wild magic. Basically, your magic comes from your innate abilities because of some powerful being in your blood that affected your blood. So next we have Warlock. Warlock is a half caster, and their whole thing is like they dive through occult, hidden, and like forbidden knowledge and stuff. And so in doing so, they usually find some being. And this can be like a god or goddess, like the clerics, or some sort of other powerful entity. And the warlock makes a pact with this entity. And so this entity gives them their pact magic, their ability to cast spells, but also a bunch of different things. And so this entity for the warlock is known as the patron. And so you can have like a god or goddess, which would be your celestial patron, or like it could be a powerful devil or demon, and that would be a fiend patron. Pretty much any powerful entity a warlock can make a pact with to get their abilities. And then finally we have wizard. So wizards are full casters, and the way they know their spells and stuff is they study for it. They go off to wizarding school, they have a spell book, and they learn how to cast spells. And they're pretty much your jack of all trades in terms of spellcasting. They can't cast every spell there is, but they can cast most of them. And can do all kinds of different things with the spells that they know. So typically wizards go off to study at schools, like I said. And typically these schools will take on one of the aspects of spells. So spells have different schools that, like in the spell description, they have a type. So one type is the evocation. And so typically evocation spells, they're like explosive effects, like fireball would be an example of an evocation spell. If it was an illusion spell, that would be like invisibility or creating some sort of illusion, like minor illusion. And so typically wizards will go to a specific school. So if you want to learn specifically about necromancy, you'll go to the school of necromancy and be really good at necromancy. School of evocation, be really good at evocation, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of idea behind wizards. So those are all the main classes in this game. And now I want to talk about what we now call species. We used to call them races, species. It's the same thing. Basically, in this game, you have all the regular ones like, your elf and your dwarf and your halfling. But you have a few more that are kind of unique to Dungeons and Dragons. You have Aasimar, which are like the celestial born, like god born. You're demigods, basically. And you also have your Dragonborn, which are pretty much what it says. They're born of dragons. So basically the idea is long ago, Dragonborn hatched from dragon eggs that were either blessed by the dragon gods or cursed by the dragon gods. We're not really sure. But you have Dragonborn. And you have your regular dwarves who typically like live in hills or mountains, do the whole mining thing. You have your elves, which typically do elf things. And I say typically, but in reality, like as a dungeon master, you can do whatever you want. If you want your dwarves living like elves and your elves living in the mountains, mining like dwarves, then go for it. Whatever fits your story and your game. But yeah, having said that, we also have gnomes, which gnomes are magical little tinkering guys. And so they have like an innate ability to withstand most magic. But that's their thing, is they tinker. Then you have Goliaths, which are giant kin. half giants. That's what Goliaths are. You also have, the halflings, and then humans, of course, regular human. And then orc, orcs, they're just orcs. Then you got tieflings, which are just like the Aasimars were like the demigods and like half angel, half human, or half god, half human. You have tieflings who are half demon, half human, half devil, half human, half evil, half human, is the idea behind tieflings. And so there's a lot of different species in this game with all its expansions and things. And people can even make their own kind of species. You can be a mushroom person if you want to, But those are the main ones in the 2024 Player's Handbook. So now I want to talk more about like the specifics and what might apply to monsters. Not just monsters, but also players. So there are different creature sizes in this game. So the smallest one is tiny. Tiny creatures are usually about anywhere smaller than like 2 feet tall, 2 feet wide. And that ranges from like insects. Any kind of insect would be a tiny creature, unless it's a giant insect, then it might not. So also like really small creatures like fairies, not so much fairies, but like pixies, sprites, they're considered tiny, really small creatures. Then you have small, which ranges about, tall, bigger than tiny, about 5 feet tall, I would say, 3 to 5 feet tall, around there. And like some of your playable races are small, like the halfling is small, the gnome is small, and so, smaller creatures like that. Then you have medium, which all of your playable races that aren't small are going to be medium. So that's the regular size of a regular person, usually around anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7 feet tall, 7, like especially the Goliaths could reach like 7 feet and higher. But your medium-sized creature is the regular size human-like creature. Next you have large. These are your like 8, 9, 10, 11 foot tall creatures. And this can be like trolls. You have your bears. Some bears are smaller, and so they would be medium. But your big bears would be large. Like horses are considered large. And that sort of thing. So yeah, next you have huge, which is like your 12, 13, 14, 15 foot tall creatures. From your giants to like sentient trees. That's the kind of size that we're talking about. Then next you have gargantuan. Gargantuan is pretty much 20 feet tall and anything bigger. So like your Tarrasques, your purple worms, your demon lords, most of them are going to be gargantuan. It's pretty much just like tiny is like this height and pretty much anything smaller. Gargantuan is this height and anything larger. So those are the different sizes for creatures. And so especially keep in mind the typical size of a human is medium, about that 5 foot, 6 foot tall range. So now I want to talk about different monster types. There are different types of monsters in this game, and they all mean something different. So first we have aberrations. Aberrations are your alien beings. These are things like aboleths, beholders, mind flayers, these weird, wrong kind of creatures, these alien beings. That's what aberrations are. Then you have beasts. Beasts are your like natural creatures, things that you would see in real life, like your dogs and your cats, your horses. These are considered beasts. But also in this game, giant animals are considered beasts. So like a giant spider, that's still a beast in this game. And then you have Celestials. So in Dungeons and Dragons, you have this idea of like the upper planes where all your gods and goddesses live, and you have like angels and other angelic beings. And so creatures that originate from these planes are celestials. That's the general idea. Then you have constructs. These are basically your robots or other magically created creatures. Homunculi are creatures that you magically create using like clay and stuff, but also just like your shield guardians, which are basically just robots. Like an animated suit of armor would be considered a construct, that sort of thing. Then you have dragons, which are, they're dragons. Feel like there's not, big, scaly, leathery wings. Although I will make the distinction that in Dungeons and Dragons, a true dragon has to have 4 legs and a set of wings that's separate from their legs or arms or whatever you want to call it. And then a wyvern would be the wings are connected to the arms. But yeah, dragons. Then you have elementals. Just like you have like the upper planes, you have these things called the elemental planes, which are these 4 elements: air, water, earth, and fire. And so elementals are like the physical manifestation of creatures from those planes and creatures of like the natural primal elements. Then you have Fae. Fae are creatures tied to this other plane called the Feywild. The Feywild is a parallel plane to the regular plane that everything exists on, which is called the material plane. The Feywild is like this magical, foresty type place. And that's where you get your Fey with things like pixies, fairies, sprites. And in this game, goblins are also considered to be Fey. And so that's what Fey is. Then you have your Fiends. Just like we had like the upper planes and celestials, we also have the lower planes and Fiends. These are like your devils, your demons, and any other demonic, devilish-like creature. That would be a Fiend. Then you have giants. These are your towering, human-like looking creatures, like your cyclopes, your trolls, your regular giants. They're giants. Then you have humanoids. Humanoids are any of your playable races. The Aasimar, the dwarf, the elf, your human, all these have the creature type humanoid. And so they're basically just human-like, basically. And so next we have monstrosities. Monstrosities are pretty much any unnatural creature, magical creature that doesn't fit into any of the other creature types. So these are your things like an owlbear, and pretty much any other monstrous type monster. Like your manticores, all these things are monstrosities. Then you have oozes. These are like gelatinous creatures, slimes, that sort type of thing. It's all different kinds of oozes, black puddings, ochre jellies. But yeah, slimes, basically. Then you have plants. Plants are just sentient plants, sentient flowers, sentient mushrooms, sentient trees, that sort of thing. Those are plants. Then finally you have undead. Undead are like zombies, ghosts, spirits, vampires, all that sort of thing. Those are undead. And so those are all the creature types for this game. And so that's the end of this video. I hope that now you at least have a good idea of what Dungeons & Dragons is, generally how it works, and in the future, when I mention something like a specific size or specific creature type, you'll be able to tell what I'm talking about now. And so that's all I have for you today.